would just like to present the moderator, Caitlin. Thank you very much for being here. Caitlin is coming from Providence, and she's the director of the Alliance of Artists Community, and has been involved in professional arts management for nearly 2 decades, first in the performing arts and later on behalf of artists of all disciplines. She has served the Alliance since 2002 and was appointed Executive Director in 2008. During her tenure with the Alliance, she has launched several major initiatives, including the Emerging Program Institute, a boot camp for those developing new artist residency programs, the Leadership Initiative, an intensive leadership training retreat, the Sustainability Project, helping the field of artist residency programs develop organizations that not only survive, but thrive, and the Residencies for Arab Writers, a collaboration with the Alliance and more than 20 residency programs to support emerging Arab writers. Under her leadership, the Alliance membership has grown by 40%, conference attendance has doubled, and the organization has granted more than 1 million in funds to artists and residency programs. Caitlin has served as a grants panelist for the National Endowment for the Arts, the Choice Foundation, and the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. She holds a bachelor's degree in music performance from Columbia College Chicago and a master's in musicology from Roosevelt University, where her research focused on music as a tool for building communities of resistance and social dissent. So, without further ado, I pass the word on to you, Caitlin. Thank you very much, and enjoy the evening.
Thanks very much. I didn't know you were going to read the long version of the bio. So that's all you're going to hear about me, and the rest is going to be about all the other guests that are here. Thank you, Andreas, for having us here, and thank you, Swissnex. As Andreas said, the Alliance of Artists Communities is an international association of artist residency programs. We're based in Providence, Rhode Island, but we work with several hundred different residency programs around the country as well as around the world. And most of the conversation tonight is going to be talking about international residency programs for artists, but many of the panelists have also done domestic residency programs as well, so we'll be hearing about some of those as interesting. We have about 45 minutes for our conversation and then about 20 to 30 minutes for questions. So forgive me for not reading your long bios. I'm going to give the short ones. And then just get into a conversation. And we will be talking a lot about the kind of experiences of residencies, the benefits of residencies. Maybe not so much about some of the nuts and bolts stuff, but again, we'll have lots of time for questions afterwards. And if there are other kinds of specific questions, hang on to those until the panel discussion is done, and we'll try to get to those. And then I think most of us will be sticking around for the networking portion afterwards as well, so feel free to just come up and meet us afterwards. So I'm just going to go down the row here quickly and introduce everybody. First on my right is Donna Dodson. She is a sculptor. She grew up in Alaska, right? Oh, so that's you. I messed up already. So I had Andreas do all the introductions. So you didn't grow up in Alaska. Yeah. But you probably want to go there, right? We're going to. She's going to Alaska. Donna was an artist resident at Verbier in 2011, so she'll be talking a little bit about that experience. To her right is Andy Morline. Did you grow up in Alaska? Okay, I knew it was somebody. Also a sculptor and was also at Verbier in 2011. Montanus is a visiting professor of the practice at MIT, a media artist, working in photography, video, publications, internet, and I hear some very interesting projects on translation. To his right is Kiki Thompson, who, as Andrea said, is a sculptor and the founder of the Verbier 3D Residency Sculpture Park. Thank you for flying and being here. You need some coffee. Yeah. Or at least chocolate. And next to Kiki is Franklin Einsbruck. Did I say that correctly? Who is also sort of fresh off of a plane from the other coast. painter and art critic, essayist, and writer who has done residencies in Greece, Taiwan, and as of this last week, the Morris Graves Foundation in Northern California. And then next to him is Lynn Allen, who is an artist and the director of the School of Visual Arts at Boston University. Has been an artist in residence in Jordan. And then at the end is Mary Sherman, who is the founder and director of Transcultural Exchange. Has done many residencies, been teaching for a long time here in Boston. And Mary's going to talk about some of her residency experiences, but I've also asked her to talk at the end specifically about Transcultural Exchange at the conference that they do in Boston every year, which is a really fantastic opportunity to learn about lots and lots of residencies from around the world. So I'd like to just start by asking Kiki if you can talk a little bit about Verbier and tell us about that as kind of an example of residencies, and then maybe to talk about your experiences there and just get started.
Basically, in 2010, a friend of mine and I, who is a painter, she and I were in New York at the School of Visual Arts doing a summer residency. And in the New York heat wave, we decided that it would be nice to. Thank you.
This is better, probably. In the New York heat wave, we decided that it would be nice to put some sculptures in the nice, cool mountain air. So we decided to start an artist residency in Verbier and a sculpture park. So I think we'll learn more about different templates for residencies, but they're really wide and varied. But ours was basically based on art and culture, so putting sculptures up the mountain and inviting the community into the tent to demystify the making of art. And then basically introducing the whole sort of idea of making someone look at a piece of art, but then also make them aware of their environment. And you'll see from the video, which is coming up, because I think the images say more than I can actually tell you, that the environment is quite spectacular there. So, and we also had education side, so we also taught, gave 4 classes to the local children for free, and we had about 300 kids in our classes. So could we put the video on, please? The 3D Foundation was conceived in 2011 by 2 artists, Madeleine Patrineau and Kiki Thompson, to create a museum without walls at high altitude. It is in the heart of the Swiss Alps in Verbier, which welcomes over 1 million visitors per year, that the 3D Artist Residency and Sculpture Park has established itself. The Verbier 3D Sculpture Park Residency strives to promote art for social innovation, including education, culture, and the community.
The challenge I wanted to try and achieve was something complementary with the mountain, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, something sensual and fertile, a female form.
I think this project is really a kind of laboratory to think about monumentalism.
Yeah.
Because how do you do monumentalism on a mountain?
No, that's really hard.
You know, how do you do that?
A stork that is pregnant, since storks bring babies.
One of my biggest enjoyments is finding out that my work has touched someone that I don't know, because I was affected that way.
be one of the first to have sculpture at this elevation, and also to deal with the kind of challenges that the mountain's given. It's a great growing experience.
Do you guys want to talk a little bit about your experiences there and what your residencies were like? Maybe some of the surprises, some of the unexpected benefits?
Sure. It was the first residency, well, not the first one that I've done, but first one in a foreign country, certainly. And I felt like it was an advantage that I had studied French, that I had a language, a bridge to the culture where we were going. And some of the challenges were trying to find materials. A lot of the chemistry of industrial materials is just simply different in different countries, so that was a hurdle to surmount. And that's also the largest piece I really made. So it was taking a huge leap of my work, and felt like it should be full support to do that.
How long did you do?
5 weeks.
So were you able to really complete a whole piece in that amount of time? Did you go there with an idea in mind of what you were going to do?
Yeah, we debated that, whether to go with an idea or go blank. We've never been to the land, and we thought maybe we should experience it and then respond to it. But I did come with some ideas, and again, I had discussions with people with Farmland, and that really helped me formulate an idea to go there with.
I've done a previous residency, a symposium, where the expectation was you come with a blank slate and you go in and respond to the environment. Kiki said, oh, we need materials, let's work on the top of this mountain. So I sent a list of materials and kind of had to fabricate in my mind the materiality that I was going to be approaching the piece with. And so I went with this, at least a pretty good idea of what I was going to do, but you're immediately struck by the environment of the high Alps, and it was amazing. I mean, I totally reconfigured my design to respond to the mountainscape, and I don't know if you noticed, but I actually had 2 pieces that were completed during that time. Because I had such a good plan for my first piece, there were lulls and moments when I have time to be able to work on another piece, and I put another whole piece together that was really responded to the conversation I'd had with other people at the residency. I think one of the remarkable and interesting parts of this residency was that not only did we have artists there, but we brought a curator from the Tate, Paul Goodwin, contemporary curator from the Tate Museum, and his presence there, even though it was only 2 different times, one at the beginning and one later at the end of the residency, was very evocative for all of us as artists. And I think it's a wonderful way to contextualize artists working and having conversations.
Did you find that too, the other people there?
Yeah, I knew I was going to do the pregnant story. Like, I kind of went with that idea, and I had a wood maquette here for a picture. But then, you know, in the conversation with Tom Goodwin, it was a conversation about, well, should the store face the track and the people, or should it face out? You know, and so I think he really helped me think about my piece in a different way. That without that conversation, I don't know what I would have chosen. But again, it was a very conscious choice. So I felt like he really shaped what we were doing.
Is that something, Kiki, that you try to do with the residencies in general, to have other people, you know, critics or curators or folks like that involved as well?
That was our first residency, so for our second residency, yes, we're planning on having the same curator. But yeah, we're going to have, it will be a little bit different this year. We're going to have Paul come again, and he will be curating, and he'll come for a little bit longer at the beginning to have more time, more conversations with the artists, and then probably less time at the end, because it's important to have his presence for the vernissage, but otherwise he's not going to be making a huge impact on an artist's piece because it's already done and installed. But we'll also have panel discussion, one panel discussion on art in the environment, which we didn't have any last year, so that's quite exciting. And we'll also have some evenings with artist presentations. So,
is there a town that is nearby, or is there a connection to a community there, or is it mostly just the internal community of the other artists that are involved?
Well, it's Verbier. Verbier is a ski resort, so the ski season is over. Last Sunday was the last day of the lifts, so the town is becoming quite empty. There is a year-round community, but it's about 2,500, 3,000 people, so it's not massive. So I think probably the artists were probably quite surprised that there weren't that many people there, and some of the shops and things were closed. But at the same time, it meant that they could make noise with their tools.
Which is a bonus as a sculptor. Franklin, you just returned from residency, and you've done others in other parts of the world as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about your different residency experiences and how they vary from each other?
The one I just came back from was the Morris Graves Foundation residency, which is up in Humboldt County, California, where I'm the Oregon board. And the international ones I did were at the Aegean Center for the Fine Arts in the island of Paros and the Kyklades in Greece. And I did another residency in 2005 at Stock 20, which is in Taichung, Taiwan. And each of them were really sort of different in their own way. I haven't done a whole lot of residencies that involved other people. The Morris Graves Foundation admits at most 10 people a year, one artist at a time, and you have basically no contact with anyone during that time. There's no cell phones, internet, anything else. So you are very much there by yourself in a studio overlooking a lake at Morris Graves' former home. The residency that I did in Greece was in affiliation with an American school called the Aegean Center for Fine Arts. And the Aegean Center takes American students for the most part and tries to unschool them a bit. They have sort of an anti-academic attitude, even though they are ostensibly running a school-type program. That I think they have a very interesting take on things. And so I was there for a semester, and I went back for a brief visit a little bit later. That would have been 2004, and then 2003. And then Stock 20 is an interesting place. Everybody knows Taipei in Taiwan. So there's Taipei, Taichung, Taiwan. So North City, Center City, South City, literally. And basically nobody has any reason to go to Taichung. So what they've done, among other things, to support the arts, and Taiwan in general is very supportive of arts communities, arts in general. They've taken a railway hangar, basically. This was some sort of block or complex that was a part of the railroad that goes through Taichung, and they converted it to artist studios. So the studios and living spaces are basically a cinder block all the way through, and that was very interesting. And there was a community of artists there, only a few of whom were international artists, and the rest of whom, there's a very good art school in Tainan, in the south of Taiwan, and quite a few of the people that come up from the school in Tainan to take residencies in Taichung. So even though there were other artists there were some pretty hefty communication barriers. My Chinese is terrible, and was being corrected by laundresses. I could barely even say thank you. It was really embarrassing. But anyway, that was the quality of the residency, and that did put a particular spin on it. I've also, last year I did a residency at the Helen Keller Houghton Foundation, which is up in Cranberry Isle, Maine. And that was the former home of Jack Helliker and Bob Houghton, who were painters in New York City for many, many years and teachers there for a long time. And they converted this property that was pretty much a disused shipyard into pretty ramshackle artist studios that after, when they were in their advanced stage, they decided they wanted their home to be a residency as well. And so there were 2 artists there at a time for that. They at most take 5, and 1 is not unusual for them. So very little community of the residencies I've done, but that does give you a lot of time to focus, and you can talk to yourself loudly if you feel like it, and go through whatever process you need in order to get to where you need to go artistically. And that there's something to say for that as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things we were talking about earlier was that for artists who have different working practice when they're not in residence, that the residency can provide an alternative to that. So if you're somebody who's often in immersion with lots of other people all the time, if you're teaching or things like that, that sometimes the residency is your only chance to really be in a more solitary studio practice, and vice versa for people who are working in solitude. A residency can provide a different kind of community. Lynn, you have done residencies all over the world, Canada, Sweden, Belgium, Russia, Jordan, South Africa, and China, as well as...
China's next week.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe he can teach you how to say
Maybe
it.
you
And also Virginia Center for the Creative Arts and the
Yes.
Plains Art Museum here. Do you want to talk about some of your experiences?
Sure. I'll talk about the international ones first, but the first one I ever did was in 1989 when I was invited to the Soviet Union for 2 months, which was a pretty big eye-opener. I'm a printmaker. My degree is actually in painting, but I'm a printmaker, so I work on paper. And so most of the places I've been have been particular to that discipline because you need to have equipment to be a printmaker. And so the eye-opener in Russia was really interesting because in '89 things were opening up, but there weren't that many foreign artists that went to the Soviet Union unless they were from Cuba or somewhere else that was affiliated with the Soviet Union. So it was, for me, really interesting and incredibly powerful for my artwork, which at that time was really rooted in sort of social injustice. So it really was, I made a massive amount of work, which was critiqued, I learned. Every night when I went to bed, they went in my studio and went through all my stuff. And then the next morning, breakfast, saying, "Well, I really liked you." I mean, it was really pretty interesting. I was like unusual. I think the other ones that are really memorable, and for me, you hit the nail on the head, is because I was a faculty member, because I was a teacher. I wasn't at Boston University then, I was at Rutgers University in New Jersey. For me, and with a small child and a family, to be away on an artist residency was the gift of a lifetime. Because I didn't have to take out the trash, I didn't have to answer the phone, I didn't have to do any of that kind of stuff. And when you're teaching, you're so involved in everyone else's work that your work is sort of put on the back burner. And so for me, it was, they were marvelous experiences to grow as an artist, but also to even give back to my students. When I had the residency in South Africa, I've since then sent 3 people there as interns, three students in separate occasions as interns. So it's sort of giving back my experience to students. I think the most unusual one, because Sweden is lovely. It was heaven. And it was really marvelous. I was invited there for 2 months. And I was at the Franz Maserengel Center in Belgium. But the one that was the most sort of exotic, I guess I would say, was Jordan. And I was there the first time in 2000, I think. I can't remember, because I've been there more than once. And what that did, it was interesting because I had a residency, but I also worked with some of the Jordanian artists. And so I really got to know the artist community a little bit. And because it was such a world that I had never been to before, to be in the Middle East was just incredibly interesting, hot. They thought I was nuts. I'm out there in a tank top, which is probably not the smartest thing to do, graining marble to do a lithograph because I used Jordanian marble. I mean, I was like this, pretty odd. But what that did was it opened up connections for me later. I got a Fulbright scholarship to Jordan, and I went back for an entire year, 2004, 2005. And so these kinds of residencies, not only do they build your art vocabulary, and it makes connections that just bring more experiences, that bring more to your art, but also the whole networking. And the printmaking community is a pretty small community. I mean, even I know people from 4 continents that are printmakers because it's a very networky kind of collaborative group. because printmaking is collaborative. It's not like painting where you're in your studio all the time and you want to talk to other people. And I always learn from these other people. It's Virginia Center for Creative Arts, I think I've been there 4 times. It's a heaven, and I learned a lot from the writers, the other writers that were there. And so to go to those communities where it's not just visual artists but other people is really invigorating. I'll say enough.
Gonzalo, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experiences with residencies and your creative practice?
Yeah, I think probably everybody when we are here and we are participating residents, we will agree that two things that I think residents try to provide. One is concentration, like to be in a period of time in a place where you could develop your work without caring about other things. And the other thing is, I will say, connection. Because the time you are not working, you meet with other people from other parts of the world, and you establish a kind of mini network that helps after when you are out to see that you are not alone, that many other parts of the world you are connected with other people doing works that could be or similar or connected, and I think this is important. Always when I teach, I tell the students to try to travel. I think it's a very important thing to go other places, and I think the residence is a good way to connect with that. I was expecting today a much more younger audience that we could transfer this information in a way that it could be used. No? I mean, of course, it could be used. But I think it's like the experience of, for young people, I think, to run away their own countries and go to other countries and spend time with other people and working there, I think is very important. Maybe to come from Spain and I ran away from the Franco period, and that it was the political situation, and that I always feel like to go to other places, have other culture, other confronting other situations is an important experience.
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting as we were discussing through email before the last few weeks, everybody mentioned people and the other connections to other people, which I think is something, if you haven't done residencies, you don't necessarily think about. You think about having the time and space, you think about getting away from your everyday life, you think about access to equipment and facilities, you think about that just concentrated studio time, but not necessarily the impact that other people have, either as formal collaborators or just other folks who inspire you or seeing other people's studio practice. Mary, I know you have a really long and rich history with residencies in a lot of different ways, and they've been really transformative for you. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences?
Yeah, I have maybe a slightly different, couple things that happened to me that are slightly different. One, they really expanded my practice. So I met a composer who now I work with and does well, not always the sound, but a lot of the sound for my work. So that was something that was really great. And then the other thing that I've had the luck of, or the fortune of being in places where I was a resident at MIT in mechanical engineering. So I learned how to use a water jet cutter. I worked in a glass lab, and then that led to which I never worked with glass. So then that was cool, and then that led to going to Pilchuck and using their glass facilities. So one of the things that hasn't been touched upon, but I think that another thing about residencies that is nice is this ability to try things you haven't tried before and be around people who can show you how to do these things. So that's slightly different. And then should I talk about the conference, or bring?
Let's get back to that. Okay. Do you want to say more about your residency experience?
I think that my residency experience is probably not so unlike everyone else's in that the sense that the things that have been touched upon, that I met a lot of people. I've gone to various residencies. There's also maybe I don't know how aware people are, but there's also something that are shorter in Europe called Symposium, which is 10 days, which, since I work all the time, I could take 10 days off, and so this is something to consider, that there's these programs where you work very concentrated. Usually the facilities are smaller, so you're working in a studio with lots of people, which is this is also another thing that this comes up, which I think you, Andy, and Donna brought up is, I mean, I make mechanical things, so I cannot bring very few, I cannot bring things on the plane very easily. So I always have to think about, okay, what am I going to do, I think the other great thing about residencies is all of a sudden I'm supposed to be creative in a way that I can't really be normally. So I always find that I stretch myself and have gained a lot from that.
That's a really great point, and I'm glad you bring that up, that idea that limitations actually lead to greater expansion, and that change of scenery that can happen in your residency. But you also talk about the opportunity to try new things, and I think that, to me, is one of the great gifts that residencies offer, is this openness to experimenting and to trying new things. And I hear from a lot of artists who are thinking about doing residencies for the first time and say, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, and I kind of want to try new things, and what if I go there as a printmaker and then I decide I want to do sculpture, and is that okay? And the answer is always yes. We'll find a way to make it happen. Yes, yes, yes. And Kiki, maybe you can talk a little bit about that as an organizer of a residency, where obviously people need to come in with some plan and some conception in advance, and yet still trying to embody that spirit of openness and experimentation.
Yeah, well, basically we have the curatorial concept is sent out to all residents before they come, and so they have some time to sort of mull it over in their heads. And last year we were very strict about, we need to know what materials you need and so forth. This year I think we're a little bit more relaxed about materials. We know how long it takes to get them in, and we actually have fewer sculptors this year. We have 2 video artists this year, so that will add a whole new dimension to our residency.
And for both of you being at Verdier, you both talked a little bit about how things kind of changed while you were there. Did you feel like, compared to other residencies that you've had, that there was still that opportunity to really kind of experiment and not be just outcome focused?
Yeah, I didn't really feel like there was a chance to take risks or just go in the direction of what I would like to do.
I found, I actually participated as one of the residents, even though I organized it as well. And I found that I did end up by learning a lot, because I'd never actually done a concrete piece before. So I was using a new material, even though the concept was similar to other materials. It was still a different sort of thing. And I learned a lot from the other artists. I had to really sort of get information out of them, because I was not at all confident in what I was doing. So it was good. It was a really good experience. So I hope you guys did too.
Put you on the spot in front of the person who brought you. For those of you who have done multiple residencies, maybe you can talk a little bit about how different residencies, whether they're solitary or more community-based, function at different points in your career, or the different kinds of work that you're working on. For example, I've heard from some artists who, when they're really going in a new direction and they're not feeling very confident yet about what they're doing, they like to be in an environment in residency where they can just hole up in the studio in solitude and not worry about having to show anybody what they're doing. And then maybe other times they're really looking for more interaction. So maybe some of you can talk about it a little bit.
I'll take that. I think that's absolutely correct, and that if you are thinking about a new direction or want to see if you can go in a new direction, it's better not to have any kind of input into that, just because you will kind of make stuff with the expectation that no one will see it. The residency that I just came back from, the people who run the residency are, strictly speaking, not artists. I could tell from the interaction with them that it was their feeling that the art that was getting made in the studio was not to be talked about unless the artist himself brought it up. So they very much wanted to not be a part of what was going on in the studio unless they were invited to do so. And I do find that the more people who are around, the more you go into production mode, that you will be more likely to execute that idea that you have or do that series that you had in mind because there are people who are going to be watching you in that process. And even if they're not formal critiques or anything like that, you just, if you have any ambitions as an artist, I think you get a sense that there's an audience there and you will do the thing that you know how to do in order to make that happen. And then that can develop your work in its own way just by iterating through your own process. In terms of doing something that's unfamiliar to you, it's probably better to just not have an audience there.
Well, for me, I really, well, in Russia, obviously, I had a lot of solitude because my Russian was not that great. And I enjoyed the solitude because, although it wasn't always solitude, I mean, I had a shared studio space, but I talked all day long in my real job. So to actually go somewhere else and actually just be inside myself, and because I work in all of the residencies I've been at, it's been as if I was a bottled up. Everything was bottled up because I only can work in certain times because of the necessity of what I do all day long. And that when I actually get there, I kind of explode. My husband was on the residency with me when we went to Belgium, and he was the second time when we went to Jordan. And he is the exact opposite. He doesn't want anybody to watch what he's doing. He's holed up in a little place, and it takes him like 3 months to get something done, whereas I was banging the work out. And so I think for me, it's a combination of both. It's of having the space so I can really be in my own head, but at the same time, these places are friendly places with other people, and they're respectful of coming and talking when you want to, and then hanging back when you don't want to. And so in all of the places I've been, it's been that way. And it's for me, it was a happy balance. I guess I have the kind of personality that my husband says I'm like a virus. I could live anywhere. So I fall in. I mean, and Jordan there was some getting used to. I mean, there's certain words you need to learn when you want to take a taxi somewhere. But I think it's people are very respectful most of the time in residencies.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple things I want to say. One of the things I think when I go on a residency, especially overseas, I mean, I think I'm going to meet another culture, so I'm very keen to actually get out and do things and, try to figure out the taxi scene in Taipei. Bring a little car. So these things are really, I've actually used them to learn about the world. So and different ones are different ways. There's one in Taiwan, the Taipei Artist Village, where you get an apartment to yourself. But it's like an apartment complex, and everyone else in the apartment complex is an artist too. So you walk down the hallway and you run into all these other artists. But I'm really happy they were there because I had people to go to dinner with. So, if any of you are interested in the one at Pilchuck, there's 2 ways you can do the one at Pilchuck. And I did it where I was the only person there at night, which is out in the nowhere land woods, and I forgot my flashlight one night. So yes, bad. But what was great was they give you an assistant who shows you how to do things, because I have no idea how to do anything in glass, and then they leave for 2 or 3 days. And the thing was, I had 40 kilns at my disposal to do whatever I wanted with. And then someone told me, oh, well, they went there in the summer where it's jam-packed. And I said, well, that'd be horrible because you have to wait for the kiln. Meanwhile, I made 40 different mistakes and tried again the next day. So if you're interested in glass, this is a great program, and they have 2 ways of doing it. So.
Well, I think it would be interesting to comment something about the space of the residents, because we talk maybe in abstract, and I see that a resident is places where they have studios, or have a central space where people go for dinner or lunch. And I think the spaces is important because most of the residents are recycled spaces, all buildings are recycled, but also some residents, I remember in the Banff Center in Canada, in the Rocky Mountains, and Montalvo in California, they make a very interesting and sophisticated project of building new studios, asking architects to think about. For example, a studio for a musician, then it would be a commission, then it would need specific things. A studio for a writer is totally different than the studio for a sculptor and a studio for a painter. And that you could see that it's several pavilions with different architecture. Everybody, in a way, it would be affected by this space. No? Montalvo too. I think Montalvo in California, close to the San Francisco, it has a series of houses, studios that have been really challenging, and they are unusual, like that you have an experience itself also, or to habitate in a space that created another experience.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There are lots of really wonderful repurposed buildings, churches and warehouses and factories and things like that, and then also some really wonderful newly built facilities specifically for a residency. And I think that sense of physical space, whether it's in the mountains and Alps, or if it's even just in a warehouse in an urban setting, that does impact the work that you do and seeps into you, especially if you're there for a longer period. Mary, I want to just give you a little bit of time to talk about the Transcultural Exchange Conference, and then we'll open up to questions.
The reason I started to talk earlier was because one of the most important things to me that a residency did was it made me start this conference on international residencies, because I was going to these residencies and I'd come back and people say, oh, I would love to go to Izmir. And I said, oh, we sort of have to like meet the people, you know, and so I thought, well, Transcultural Exchange has been in existence for, I don't know, 15 years before that, doing these projects around the world with artists I knew. And then I thought, well, you know what, why don't I just invite all the residency program directors I know and ask them to ask some other people and invite them all to Boston so that then all my friends could meet them all. So that's how it happened. So every 2 years, Transcultural Exchange, which is this non-profit I founded, has a conference on international residencies in the arts. And I think last year we had over 150 speakers from around the world who run all these programs in all different variations, some for 10 days, some for you can go for 2. I think Stuttgart you can go 2 years. And you know, some of them you get stipends of $40,000 a year, and some of them, you know, you just get, you know, a studio space. Yeah, that is like, yes, that one is like rare. But you know, so they come in. It's very rare, but you really want to go there. It's in a castle. So what is that? It's in Stuttgart. It's Academy Schloss Solitude, and so it's a castle. It's, where is it? It's in Stuttgart. It's Academy Schloss Solitude. So anyway, so there's, and they take people from all disciplines. They also take literature, scientists, architects. So anyway, so all these people come to the conference and they tell you about their programs and they do portfolio reviews, and I'm very happy to say that almost, well, I know we take surveys at the end, 45% of the people get an invitation to residency or an exhibition out of the conference, or some people actually, there's a really great grant person. She finally got a grant she was working on after him helping her. And I think the numbers are probably higher because not everyone fills out the survey. But I think that there's for some reason, I mean, I was running this international program, but I had no idea about the world of residencies out there. And when I did, I thought, well, this would be a great service. And I think the residencies who come realize that they're looking for Americans, you know, because Americans are not as well represented abroad as they used to be in the 60s and 70s. I think, and most of the, you know, the Venice Biennale and all of those, the Americans were, I don't know, a huge percentage of those big fairs and art festivals were Americans. And now it's almost the inverse. So this is, you know, they're interested in knowing you and vice versa.
And I think, you know, one of the things that is really terrific about the conference is not just hearing about the different residency opportunities, but also just different things that are impacting artists around the world, and some of the commonalities and some of the differences in terms of what people are thinking about, what you know, curatorial practices look like in different parts of the world, and having attended the last now that you've done. Having attended the last meeting.
We're so happy to have you.
Just a really rich conversation that happens with a lot of people who are engaged every day in how we support artists around the world, and it's a really fantastic gathering. I want to just open it up now to questions from all of you so we can have a chance to hear what you are thinking. Yes?
Question for the person who runs Verbier. Verbier is known for having one of the most exquisite musical festivals. How much do you interface?
Well, last year we tried to collaborate with them. And we're very good friends with, I'm very good friends with the people who organize it, but we don't interface a huge amount, but what we do is we get our sculptures up the mountain before the music festival starts, so that the people who go to the music festival can then go and enjoy the sculpture park. And eventually what we'd like to do is to hold some panel discussions during the music festival itself to have some sort of crossover, but we haven't gotten there yet.
So everyone's talked a lot about how the residency has affected them. I was wondering about the converse. How have you affected the areas that you live? Have there been outreaches to the community in positive ways in which you and your work have impacted them? For everyone.
In Verbier, one of the nice things was that Kiki arranged for hundreds of children to come through and take workshops with us. So, you know, Donna and I are sitting there using sign language as best we can. She had good French. My French is high school French. And, but there was such enthusiasm, and I think, as Kiki said, we also always opened up the tent at 6 o'clock every night, and people from the community would stroll through every day and talk with us. And it was the young people that I think were the most fascinating. We had a few children who always got off the bus and walked through the tent every day and talked to us, and you know, they get used to coming over and asking what was going on. Those are inspirational moments I don't think we can predict, but I think awaken the community in a way that a small community like Verbier during the off-season is working class people, and then the people that have chosen to be there, the business owners who stay there all year, basically are the two clientele. So very high end and very low end, basically, to make a generalization. And I just think it was fascinating that the level of interest was equal. You couldn't tell the difference between the kids. You couldn't even tell the difference between the people that came through, because they were in their summer clothes. And you didn't know whether they were one of the workers or the guy who owned the bar.
Okay, I have two examples. When I went to South Africa, it's weird how I got there in the first place, but when I did have the residency in South Africa, the place is between Johannesburg and Durban in the mountains. Very rural. It's KwaZulu-Natal. It's very rural with a lot of poverty, unemployment, and the place was in a converted Methodist church, which I repurposed in the church. And this organization had a lot of outreach with the community in doing AIDS education and teaching children to be empowered, that they have control over their lives and their persons. And this organization actually asked me later if I would be on their advisory board, which I did. And last year we had a huge exhibition in Boston of work from this workshop. And we brought 6 people from South Africa, from that rural community, that worked with the children. And we did things with the public school kids here in Boston, where they make clothing from basically from trash. And so the same thing that they were doing with the students in South Africa, they came and did with the students here in Boston. So I felt that was a real give kind of thing. I mean, it was really great. The other thing is that when I was in Australia, and I was just there last fall for a month, I have Native American heritage, and a lot of my work lately, the last 10 years, has been about that. And they asked me to speak at one of the universities there because of their Aboriginal issues, which are actually much more raw and sensitive than even ours, because they've had things as conflicts in the 50s. I mean, whereas we're talking 1900s. And so that was very interesting, because I was able to give a viewpoint from my heritage and my knowledge to another community, which had equally troublesome, and I gained something back from that because I had no idea of the way things were in Australia. So I think that these things sort of happen serendipitously. If I answer your question right.
I can respond doing we did a residency national, have an international symposium, and we did it as a team. And, you know, I was physically there building the piece for 3 weeks. And I feel like in Nashua, the people we really connected with who came down were like the tailor who's from Vietnam, and he brought us into his studio, and he sews for a living, but he also has this art that he makes. And he's like, I think Michelangelo got breasts totally fine. And he like pulled us into his studio and brought us lunch, and it was just like, and then this like taxi, I know, and I was just like, I couldn't agree more, you know? And it was like, and then this taxi driver would video us, and he was from Pakistan, and he was like, you know, say hi to my brother and his wife, like I'm you know, beaming this back to Pakistan, and it was like, I feel like the impact locally when you do stuff like that, instead of looking at people as sort of ethnic, you're sort of really celebrating their global ties. This is a global world we have ties with. And I felt like the impact on doing something like that in Nashua was, I felt like, rather profound.
Yeah, question. There was somebody with a hand up back there before? Yeah.
Well, most of the discussion has been around the visual arts. Are there performing arts residencies as well? And are they
Yeah, exactly. There are lots of residencies for artists working in performing arts, for writers, filmmakers, choreographers, composers, architects. There are probably the least are for choreographers. They're probably the least represented just because of the nature of space needs and things like that. But that's changing a lot, and a lot of multidisciplinary spaces and multi-purpose spaces that can be used by artists in all disciplines. And as the disciplines are bleeding into each other as well, residencies are reflecting that as well.
I'd like to make a plug for your website. I mean, I think that you should. You probably have in the schedule, but the Alliance, I always get it wrong, artist communities. I got it wrong, yeah, so, but I got it wrong once and it sticks in my head. But they have a great website that you can look up different residency programs and you can find out what they support. And so I would highly recommend we get on the website.
Yeah, so you can.
Yeah, we have a website also. If you pick up the yellow, you know, this big thing that says passport, yeah, you can email me from there. Yeah.
And our website, it's also on there's a blue handout at that table, is ours. You can search by discipline, but you can also search by specific facilities and equipment. So if you need to have access to a black box theater, if you need to have access to a metal shop, things like that, you can search.
Could you just repeat your website, please?
Yes, it's artistcommunities.org. And it's also on that blue sheet that's at the door.
This is sort of an observation. I don't know if any of you have seen the Carpenter Center, the graduating students have this show. I think it's conceptual, but it's so well done it might not be. There's an artist who's claiming to have correspondence on Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg, and she's been named the artist in residence for Facebook. I just thought it was very interesting. Her name is Sarah Stern. But it is conceptual, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You had your hand up earlier?
Yes, the gentleman here. I hate to point. My question is, when you were isolated, I've had friends who've done the McDowell and Haystack, and that's a community. When you were on your own, how did you feel about that? Have you done residencies where you were in the milieu?
No, the residencies I've done for the most part have not had huge amounts of community around them. I got a little weird after a while, I think. There was no one to witness it, so it was okay. One of the things you want to think about when you're looking at these programs is the situation itself right for you. That there was, and that can take a lot of performance. You have to sort of visualize what you are going to be like in that. I'm okay for being isolated for long amounts of time. Not everyone is, and not everyone should be. On the other hand, the residency I did in Maine, there were only 2 artists there. The other artist really had a very hard time adapting, largely because she was so disconnected from the community people that she was used to being in New York City, and Cranberry Island is such that the full-time resident population there is something like 45 people. And almost all of whom came to the final reception for the residency itself, and the minister was coming through. That was when the hurricane rolled through New England last year. It was the day of the hurricane, and we were thinking, maybe we should cancel this. Like, not for these guys. These guys are going to come through a hurricane to do this, and they did. And basically ignored it and showed up at the studio in their Sunday best, sitting with windbreakers on. So, but besides that, she was having a very hard time adjusting not having the internet access that she was used to, not having the cell phone reception that she was used to, because you kind of had to hope the wind was blowing over the island correctly to get a signal on your cell phone, depending on which service you were using. And that was, quite frankly, became unproductive after a while. So you have to go through, look very carefully at what the situation is in the residency you're doing and make sure that's the right thing for you.
Was there a point where you realized that you weren't being catered to? Like all of a sudden there's a tray for breakfast and a tray for lunch and you never saw anybody?
Oh, I didn't even have a lunch tray. The way it worked at the Morris Grace Foundation is that as we went, the airport's Eureka, so I got picked up at the airport at Eureka and we stopped at the natural foods place. I bought breakfast and lunch groceries for 2 weeks, and then they would bring me dinners at night. So and also the space itself was heated with a wood stove, so the caretaker would come in the morning, check the level of wood in the wood stove, and then come back in the evening with dinner, do the thing with the stove again, and that was it. So I made friends with a blue jay. There's a Stellar's jay. There's this beautiful jay that is in Northern California with this blue and black plumage, and they're very savvy. Jays are very savvy, so I saw him eyeing my groceries through the window one morning and I put out some granola, and then that became the ritual every morning. I would give granola to this particular jay until his buddy figured out that he was getting a good deal.
I think you need to write a book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question about submitting proposals from maybe Kiki's perspective of receiving them and an artist's perspective of writing them up. Have you had success for the artists with submitting proposals that was centered around a specific topic, like gender equality or social justice, for instance, as opposed to art for art's sake? Like, I want to change this. I just want to stay. And also, as someone reviewing proposals, what are you drawn to?
I'll answer the second question first. I look at the proposals, but it's really up to our curator to make the decision. And we're so new at the moment that actually he has his own list of artists that he's choosing from. So we got a whole pile of proposals and we're just keeping them so that we have a store of artists that we can tap into. And obviously some stand out more than others, and it's very subjective. So I think just the most important thing when you're writing a proposal is to really show what your work is and give that full, really be true to yourself so that you can be true to the person that is looking at it. And it does come through.